Welcome back to the Start and Scale podcast. I'm your host, Jack Brandwood, and in this series, we're diving headfirst into the world of tech with the people who are coding the future from the front lines. This is the place where we refactor the way you think about scaling tech teams, debugging their journeys, reviewing their stories, and pushing boundaries to ship better insights. Whether you're a seasoned techie who's seen your fair share of legacy code, an aspiring professional ready to deploy your skills, or just fascinated by the world of technology, this episode will give you unique insights and practical takeaways to add to your backlog.
One big pharmaceutical company were running through their AI and ethics policy. This document was 12 years old.
So grab your headphones, commit to this listen, and let's sprint into another episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Mick, thanks for coming on.
Hello, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great to finally meet you in person. We've what's the word? We've crossed each other's paths a little bit, only because I saw you on the Crown and Kettle Pub's ale board, and I was like, that can't be the Mick Streeter I know from LinkedIn.
It is.
Yeah.
It's good pub.
Great pub.
You're close by. Nice venue to be there.
Oh, it's the dream. And you were around the corner, weren't you, originally at M. Brown?
Literally just down the road at M. Brown. I walked past today, having left, 6 months ago. Got to look in the windows, bit of nostalgia, but it hasn't changed a lot.
Dangerous, very dangerous. Well, look, I always like to start these things off with a really deep question.
Okay.
Which is, who is Mick Streeter?
Who is Mick Streeter? Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know, really. It's a difficult one to answer. I guess, who is Mick Streeter? Some bloke from Lincolnshire? Some guy that's a bit of a geek, likes software, likes asking awkward questions. I guess more traditionally, dad, husband, sports fan, music. I don't know. I guess it's really difficult to define what makes a person. I don't think I've got any massive overriding, I am not this one thing. Some people are really, really keen on that. Yeah, I guess I'm a guy just making the best of it as I go along, right?
Love that. Yeah, what a great, honest answer. And I kind of warned you very briefly before we started that I was going to ask you to draw something. Our vision of Tact is to create a world where everyone gets their dream job. You weren't always Mick Streeter, you are now. Could you draw for me what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Could I draw for you? I don't know. What can I draw?
Are you an artist?
I can barely draw a stick man.
Okay, good. Always go a stick person. Yeah, definitely.
That's not good. What did I want to be when I was? I guess. I guess it's probably quite easy to draw in a way. I guess I probably wanted to be this guy. I wanted to be an astronaut. Probably. Whether that was ever anything realistic. Or just the fact that space was cool and there were big machines and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I still feel like I haven't grown up. Don't know what I want to be. There's always something else afterwards. So, but since you made me draw a picture, it's an astronaut.
Perfect. There you go, listeners at home.
I'm sorry, everybody. Sorry.
No, it's great. The dream of being an astronaut. So it's weird. Like, we've had quite a few people in similar positions to yourself, and we get a lot of astronauts and pilots. Why do you think that is?
For me, the astronaut thing, I think it was, I'm not old enough to have been around when they're in the moon landings, but certainly the whole, like, the world of discovery was the shuttle when I was a kid. I wrote letters to NASA and they sent me pictures and stuff back just because it was quite exciting. I think I've always had a bit of a scientific mind, and that idea of discovery, as well as, great big massive machines flying off in the air. I guess that's what I found interesting about it. It was exotic and exciting, but underneath it all was like science and discovery. It certainly wasn't something I seriously like, I am going to be an astronaut, right? But I guess it's something I thought about as a kid. It's just exciting, I suppose. Exciting and not unattainable, but difficult to get there. Not many people made it, and it's a bit of cachet with it.
Yeah, it's an exclusive club. And I guess learning and discovery, and that's all ties into your role in tech now. And I really want to get into that because I think you've had such an interesting career in tech.
Okay.
But quick one, what is tech excellence for you? That's a big part of your role right now.
That's what I mean. It's really interesting. I mean, tech excellence, I guess it depends who you are and what that means for you. If you are an astronaut, if you're making rockets, then tech excellence really is that. You can, you can't iterate on a jet plane or a rocket, right? It needs to work the first time because so the technical excellence involved with something like that really is at the pinnacle of everything you do. But generally, more generally for most of us day to day, tech excellence is the thing you can do to get what you need in the cheapest and fastest way, right? It doesn't have to be the best, but it needs to answer the question you're asking of it. This is what something that I particularly love about, iterative development and the whole MVP thing is you do enough to answer your question, you do enough to satisfy your customers, and then you sit and decide whether to do more. You don't shoot for the end straight away. So I guess it's an answer that builds up, because I think often if your engineering practices are excellent, then it means you can stop short of the solution. I'm not sure that makes sense, but you don't aim for the solution. If you focus on the way you get there being as good as it can be, then good solutions fall out. So I think that for me, that's the essence of it, is that tech excellence is doing enough. It's not the latest shiny thing. It's not some particular programming language or some tool. It's using technology to deliver an outcome. And for me, that's excellent. And for many projects, right, they're doing nothing would be, if you find a solution that doesn't mean writing code and releasing some product because you can fix it some other way, well, that's cheaper, easier to maintain. You've probably done the right thing, and that's an excellent solution for you and your stakeholders, I guess.
That's a very I love that. It's a very essentialist way of looking at solving a problem. And it does, because it kind of it sounds like Occam's razor. Usually the simplest and most straightforward explanation of something is the easiest.
Yeah, and I definitely believe that with software. The whole you ain't going to need it principle, and don't build a system for fit for 1 million users if there's only ever going to be 10, or that kind of principle. You could, I guess it's that, shooting for the stars thing. You could aim to make this thing the best thing it could be, but actually you'd probably spent more money, you'd probably made it more complex, you'd probably taken more time. When if you do something super simple, that's just enough, for me, that's excellence, because that's giving you what you need. And then you can get on to something else and something else and something else.
That's wild. When I first started doing tech recruitment, I would send people tech tests, and they would always get no'd. And the reason they would get no'd is because they did too much. Which is, when I first started, I didn't know anything about tech, still kind of don't. But that was a really bizarre concept as someone who's not in the tech world.
That's a really great example, actually, because tech tests, I think, are very, very divisive. And you can look at them a few different ways, right? You got some engineer who's going to spend most of their day writing simple front-end components or munging some data or doing something, yet you send them a tech test to prove that they're Einstein, and then sit for hours discussing whether this was the best approach or not. And then you send them a tech test and get sniffy if they've used automated code completion or AI. But then when you get them in, you tell them straight away to use AI and automated code completion. I think that, again, hits at, I'm interested in people that can solve problems. And if they can solve them in some slightly round the corner way that isn't exactly what we're expecting on a tech test, then I think they're probably the people you should hire, not the people that gave you the perfect answer or could recite 1 million different data types. I mean, that's kind of interesting, but I don't think it helps you work in a team to deliver working solutions, which is what we're all there for when we're building software.
Okay, I'll definitely want to come back to that then.
Okay.
Before we do, though, I would love to understand, how did young McStreeter get to where they are now?
Well, I mean, I guess the main word would be accidentally, if you like. I guess I was always I was into computers when I was a kid. I had the Spectrum, the gaming, did a little bit of programming, but not much. Education wise, I started off thinking I was going to go down a science route. Don't know whether that was me or school or whatever that was. Went to university twice to do 2 very different degree courses. Never finished either of them.
What were they?
I went straight from school to do biomedical sciences,
Whoa.
and then had a year off, and then went to do medieval English and philosophy. So,
Bloody hell.
yeah, there you go. For various different reasons that made sense at the time, and then neither of those went the way I thought they were going to go, and I actually ended up going through an access course into programming. And after about 4 weeks, some guys from a local business came around and interviewed for a junior COBOL developer. And that was it. So I then went and worked for this business in near Nottingham for 8 years, went through the whole, started as a COBOL programmer. Then we decided our customers they didn't want green screens, they wanted pretty looking applications. So we decided to embark on rewriting these warehouse management systems in Java. So a bunch of us kind of taught ourselves and each other object-oriented programming. We wrote the first system. It was terrible. It was the programming language was Java, but it was written like COBOL. It was procedural because we didn't know any better. And then we got some help in. We got a couple of consultants to come in and work with us. A couple of really interesting people who I'm still in touch with, a couple of them. And this is where I ended up starting to really appreciate the craftsmanship around software, object-oriented design, and actually reusability and loads of clever principles there. Then getting into a bit of an epic, but briefly moved over to the dark side of sort of project management and team leadership, because at the time it was the only real way to progress. There's a kind of ceiling to being a developer. Realized it wasn't for me, decided I was going to move on. And then a guy I knew who ran what you call a white label ISP business, had built a small team of developers. He wasn't a developer, didn't know anything about developers, didn't really know how to control their work. They'd just written a system that used BT's APIs to provision broadband. And through this, we could provide white label broadband. So you could be, Jack.internet, and under the hood, it'd be our platform, but it'd be you selling broadband. So you wanted someone with a bit of programming nous, but also a bit of organizational project management stuff. So I came in and took that team and grew it, built it, and got all my Scrum badges and product owners. And then it's kind of progressed from there, really. That was the first time I think, I wasn't ever the best techie, the best programmer, but I think it really got me interested in, the organizational side, getting stuff done. And if you sort of fast forward through a bunch of jobs, doing retail fuel pricing and airline pricing and online fashion retail, right through to insure tech, where I am now, the focus has always been getting the best out of tech teams, getting shit done. That's it, actually. If you boil it down to what really interests me, what makes me tick, that's it. Getting teams, getting stuff done, understanding why they're blocked and how they're blocked, removing those blockers and helping them go faster. And that's where I am now. That's what I'm doing now. So I'm in a less explicitly technical role at the minute, leading, as well as running the data function. I'm leading a big project/program team to sort of in-house some software that's currently external. That's going to change the whole way that we do business. So I'm involved with the tech, but I'm certainly not making the tech decisions anymore, but I am helping people get better and get stuff done. So that's kind of how it's all panned out over the last, more years than I'm going to admit to. But, given I said I started as a junior COBOL programmer, that probably dates it quite accurately already.
Gave something away. People can check your LinkedIn.
Mm.
So is this the first role you've done of this type?
Well, yes and no. I guess it's still mainly leading engineering teams and helping them do stuff better. It is a slightly, I'm, working alongside a CTO when previously it would have been me more instrumental in the tech decisions. But it's good. It's great. It's a smaller company, and it's been around 17 years, that you insure where I currently am, but it's got a real startup mentality, that just the pace of getting everything done, and everybody wears a few different hats.
Wow.
And I think it's great because I'm able to work in a few areas, sit and chat with the CTO. I know you've spoken to recently, chat with the COO about getting some stuff done, sit with the CEO and understand a bit more about the budgeting and the way that I'm working with him quite a lot at the moment. Martin's a fascinating guy, but we're kind of coaching each other, right, in how we get private equity investors to understand technology or understand that we're making progress without getting into a bunch of detail that they don't care about, because they care about ones and noughts and, well, care more about nines and tens. That's where those guys are. And it's about how you translate that kind of agile, lean mindset into something that, guys who are only really interested in the bottom line, how you get them to understand, how you get them to understand what you're doing, but more pointedly, how you get them to keep giving you enough cash to do what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So it's just really super interesting. So I wouldn't say it's a totally different role. It's just got different aspects. And I think with, at M Brown, it's much bigger. So you had a smaller remit. At you insure it's smaller, but I've got to put fingers in more pies, the ability to talk to people in different roles and sort of hopefully, give them some insight into my many years of experience that might be useful and maybe not. And at the same time, I'm going to learn stuff from them, which is what's really important for me.
Yeah, because I really want to talk about the transition from M Brown Group, obviously a big business, to somewhere like you insure. But just there, you talked about how you translate technical concepts to non-technical people. And I know that's a big challenge for a lot of people in your position, even when you're just dealing with stakeholders, don't mind PE firms. How do you go about translating technical concepts to people who aren't technical?
So I think it's really important right at the outset to agree a common language. So first things first, get no jargon, no acronyms, none of that stuff, right? Speaking a common language. And then this has been a feature of lean development, the ubiquitous language for years and years, where your engineering teams and business teams, again, much as I don't like to make that distinction, speak the same language. So I think that it starts there. I love an analogy. I love translating that stuff. Software is very abstract in a way, but when you're talking about cars, when you're talking about, building a car and, we've done the chassis, we now need to choose the paintwork and all of this those kind of analogies. But more pointedly, I think it's understanding that they don't care. They don't care about technology. What they want to know is, are you going to be done? Are you going to be done? Are we going to get there? And I think often that can be difficult when you are trying to run a lean and agile process where, development moves in chunks. You run sprints or whatever, but it's incremental. You don't know everything at the start. And I think if you do go and try and learn everything at the start, you're going to be wrong by the end. And it's an interesting concept. For a CFO, for the financial guys, it's not unusual for them to reforecast their budgets. Yet I think there's some expectation that engineers know what they're going to do. And I think that's part of getting that across is, we are building this system, we're building these chunks, and often just really simplifying it. Not because these guys are simple and they need it simply laid out, but they're not really interested. They don't want to know about under the hood. I'm not going to sit and talk to some investor about unit tests and, whether we did the right thing and, we're refactoring this stuff. But I might say, we're not delivering any features this month. We're doing the servicing, right? The vehicles are in the yard, are in an oil change. That kind of an analogy that's like, yeah, it's essential. We know if you don't do these kind of activities, you're going to have a problem at the end. So I think, but largely it is just what's important is to understand what they're actually asking you. They're not asking you to describe the technology. They're saying, will you be done? Will there be an overspend? Do you need more cash now? Because often, again, it's understanding the motivations of an end date. You've all agreed an end date, but is it really that important? Is it really? It's understanding, if you're writing a FIFA game, let's say, and it's not finished by August, September, then you're done. You might as well not bother, because that's your sales period, October and November, before Christmas, right? If you're printing a daily newspaper and it's not done before it needs to go to press, then you might as well not bother. But if you're building another product where there isn't a critical end date, then that's when you want to drive those conversations. Well, why do you care about this date? Is it better to spend a bit more money early to help protect this delivery? Or are you interested in saving cash, in which case, let's do less, let's reduce the scope, or, reduce the team and go slower. It's about understanding what they're really interested in. It's usually money. When will you be done? Because when you'll be done is linked to when you'll start earning value. But even those conversations are really interesting, right? Because sometimes you don't need to deliver it all. If you can deliver some small subset first and start earning value earlier, then actually that all adds up to the same big value at the end. So I mean, I'm not sure if I have gone off the point, but it's really, I think the fundamental point is to understand why they're asking you what they're asking for, and that's going to help you, come up with an answer. But certainly, don't talk about tech, code, lines of code. That's not what they're interested in, and they'll probably think you're just trying to bullshit them if that's what you come out with, right? Right.
Yeah, but that asking why and questioning everything again really does come from a technical mindset. Because I know so many people who I've spoken to before who have had to work with technical people, and they've gone, bloody hell, I asked them to do something, and they want to know every in and out of it. I was like, and that's just because that's how technical people are, because they want to understand how things work, and it's a benefit, But like I said, if you had never worked with technical people before, then it can be quite an adjustment. So you of course worked at M Brown, big business. I don't know how many heads count or whatever, but no, big business. When you first went to M Brown Group, what did it look like, and how did it look when you left?
Well, I mean, that's a super interesting, but actually very situational question, because I joined M Brown November 2019, which was at the dawn of the zombie apocalypse. So, I joined in a reasonably large leadership team as a head of engineering. I think there were 4 other heads of engineering running across different areas, and I'd taken over a couple of areas. I was actually responsible for some of the legacy and for financial services, but anyway, that's by the by. And within 3 months, what we were actually doing was sitting in a room working out how we're going to operate this business with everybody working from home. Nobody's allowed to go out. Nobody's buying any clothes. That was what it was like for the first, certainly the first year. We got to, I think it was March, the first lockdown. And it really was we had no idea. This was totally different. We did some stuff, we had some ideas, but we figured retail was going to struggle. We spent a lot of time trying to cut the budget, trying to make sure that we were, delivering the essential technology. Actually, it wasn't planned. It was slightly fortuitous, but at the time they were just launching a home brand. And actually it wasn't clothes. It was hair clippers. It was grooming stuff because people couldn't go outside. It was hot tubs because they couldn't go on holiday. And these kind of products, which they still sell at M Brown as far as I'm aware, that they've changed it. So it's changed a lot because of COVID, but also because I think the organization really needed to lean down. There's a different mode of leadership. So, the CIO left, a COO came in with a set of different ideas. So it changed a lot. But I think I think we improved a lot of the core operating principles. I think we brought a lot of people out of the dark. There were a lot of the teams I was working on had been there for 20 years. There were the mainframe systems underneath. And by the time I left, they were largely integrated into other squads. They were running a recognized development methodology. They were reporting. They were more visible. And I think that's a lot of what we improved, was to try and change that, to try and bring the legacy, whatever word you want to use, legacy traditional teams together, rather than have them segregated from the newer teams, and actually bringing operating, rather than these development silos, a mainframe team here and a back-end team here and a front-end team here, but to build delivery teams that were able to, take an idea, work with the business owners in that area, develop it and release it.
And it wasn't like that when you got there, but that's how you got.
Again, it's such a large, there were pockets, a couple of teams were doing agile, but some weren't.
Right.
So it was just, I think it was just following that through. And again, I don't know whether this is a function of M. Brown or just a function of a larger business, but there was quite a wide turning circle. Right? It took a while. So you could make local changes, but actually spreading them out towards, in fact, there was a really insightful moment for me, I think, where I had a meeting with some other leaders in the trading teams who had nothing to do with software, right? And they were having a little giggle that we had a role called a Scrum Master. And at first I'm like, bloody hell, this has been like mainstream for 20 years and they know nothing about it. But actually then, of course, on reflecting the other way around, it's like, well, how have we done such a poor job of communicating with these people who are ultimately somewhat dependent on the software? If you're an online retailer like M. Brown, some people are heavily involved with the front end and the websites. People who actually design and make clothing, right? They're still doing a job that maybe they don't need to know, but you're still working for a digital retailer, right? Ultimately, someone on a website is the person that pays your wages. And to think actually they know nothing about this whole, half the operating budget or whatever it was spent on IT. And we've got senior leaders who don't know anything about IT. Made me think, maybe we're not doing a good enough job on communicating, right? And actually having people understand these simple terms so that when they sit in a meeting and you're talking about a Scrum Master, right? It's not something you giggle at. It's something like you understand, hey, that's just the guy that runs. It's like a team leader, right? So you can use that common language. So it was, it's very hard to be sort of objective about my route through M. Brown because so much of it was coloured by the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, and then latterly the economy in general, right, which isn't great for retailers. So it's very hard to distill. But I think we did a good job. I think we left it in a better state than we started for the most part. I did nearly 5 years there. I think that lots of the landscape had changed. I think it was down to too many reasons to really get forensic. There was so much change in that period, and it was such an odd time that it's very difficult to say, hey, we did this one thing and it turned the dial.
Sure. It's crazy to hear you say that there's people in tech-focused businesses that still aren't completely IT literate or tech literate.
Well, I guess if you think about it, Scrum's a development methodology, and these guys, I'm sure they're totally literate in CAD software and the design software for designing the dresses and the shoes and all of that kind of stuff. But when you think, actually, how many people that use websites know how they're built?
Sure.
And I think that's okay, right? You don't expect a Formula One driver to be a mechanic.
Analogy again, like it.
They drive it fast. They do all that good stuff. they may or may not have any idea about the valves and the fuel injection or all of that stuff, which is ultimately what helps them go fast. I think it's okay. I think it's just a moment of reflection for me that, we just assume everyone's an IT guy, and actually they're not necessarily.
Do you think they need to? Do you think it needs to?
I think it's just that bit of familiarity, that bit of lifting the covers, no silos, actually, so that people don't feel, maybe it's just my fault, using a term like a scrum master, right? But it's not common language. Perhaps I should just talk about team leaders. So that's, I think it's just that, do they need to? Probably not. Do I feel like people in a business all operate a bit better if they know what everyone else is doing? Well, arguably, yes. It could stop you, falling down some pitfalls. But again, you've got to focus on what you're doing yourself, actually. And if that's designing dresses, it's not necessarily knowing that those guys over there, have a sprint review every 2 weeks, and this is how they develop software. Maybe it's not important, but it's just insightful for me that, it's about assumptions, I guess. You assume that everybody knows this stuff, but that's because you're in a bubble. But it might be quite a big bubble, but it's still a bubble.
Yeah, and just interesting, really interesting thought. I never heard anyone say that before. Your leadership style, how would you describe it in as little words as possible?
Adaptive.
Nice.
For me, I hate it. It's one of the interview questions. Just like people, because there are people who like to be managed by getting a bit of a kick. This is a thing, right? You can't go, I'm this and that. Actually, what you need to be as a leader is you need to be the thing that helps your team get stuff done. And if you're not that, if you turn up and go, this is my leadership style, well, actually, you're already alienating people. I think, again, it's about understanding what your team need. That's the point of being a leader, right? And again, we're not in the army. That's different, right? There are times when people need to, follow orders and all of that stuff. But actually, that's not typically what we do in this kind of knowledge work. What I'm not there. I'm not leading a bunch of developers because I'm a better developer than they ever were. I'm there to kind of be that piece that gives them what they need, to take away blockers from them, to sort of help. So I guess I'm really collaborative. I really like to know I'm, really, really empowering in terms of, we hired you to do this stuff. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I may well expect certain outcomes from you. I may well have some suggestions. I may well help you have some of my best ideas, if you see what I mean, to help distill that knowledge down so that you're letting whatever it may be, developers or testers or anybody else. It's just to have that freedom and safety, I guess, to, safe to disagree with me, safe to say what they like, safe to have an opinion. Ultimately, decisions have to be made, and ultimately, you can't tell everybody everything because there's always stuff going on upstairs. But I think really it's that open and collaborative. You said briefly, and I managed to.
No, well, adaptive is the brief, but
I think that's it. Adaptive is the word. Is you try and do what people need because that's why you're there, right?
Brilliant. Yeah, great answer.
Good.
Wow. Yeah. No. Yeah. It is. Just a lot of new insights going from this podcast so far. Okay. Cool. And then you mentioned there psychological safety. I think, right? You mentioned like people okay to share their opinion and question things. Just inversing that, does it ever get to the point where it gets a bit of a pain in the arse?
Well, it can be a pain in the arse, right? And sometimes it is, but again, that's not my job to make myself comfortable. My job is to actually, because very, very often you gain good insights. And if someone is annoyingly asking you the same question 5 times, your first thought should be, I haven't answered that question very well, or I haven't addressed those concerns, or I haven't been clear that you can stop asking now. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the thing for me. It can be, that's humanity, right? That's people. There's always a way of dealing with and this isn't just people you work with or people who you work for or work for you, right? Sometimes you need to suck it up, right? Sometimes these questions are really annoying and you may not have the answers, but I think that's what's important there. Say, I don't know, but I'll try and find out for you. You know, yeah, I don't think it's a really good point, actually. I don't think I've ever really thought about it like that, but it's not for me. I'm not doing what I do so I can be comfortable. I'm doing what I do because I think it needs to be done. And sometimes that's wrong. And so I say, hey, that's just not right. What you've said is factually incorrect, or, in fact, there's only a couple of things that really do where I do draw the line. But they're things like, oh, we've always done it this way.
Ah.
I mean, that's I'm off then straight away, right? If you say that, then it means a whole load of things to me. It means you haven't thought about what you're saying. It means you're not doing it for a good reason. And the only other one is, oh, I knew that wasn't going to work.
Oh.
Because that's, to me, it's like, well, why didn't you tell us before? Why weren't you engaged? Why are you taking some pleasure in now telling us it's not going to work?
Yeah.
When you didn't bring this up at the start. Those probably it's those two phrases are the ones. They're the ones that I really think, well, then we've got a proper problem here, because either you haven't felt comfortable saying it, or you wanted to see it fail secretly because we're not doing it your way.
Like a Schadenfreude
And then,
sort of.
and all of that kind of stuff. You think, well, that's. And again, to put inwardly, I've done a really poor job with you because you've not felt like you could say something, in which case that means we need to get back into go and work out why this has happened. But generally, I think you get more useful insights than just people being annoying. Because I think generally people, not everybody, but most people don't set out to be annoying, right? The reason they're asking you is because they're genuinely concerned, or it's something that you may not think is important, but for them, it's like the one big thing. And I think, again, that's part of leadership, is to understand that, try and empathize with that, even if, you've never been in that position, and just try to get, okay, well, I need to understand what you need, and then I'll help you try and get there. And if we can't get there, then we might have some bigger problems to solve. But, it's not by not talking about it is never going to help, right? If it's out there and on the table, you can do something. If you just brush it away, things never get better when you just hide from them, do they?
No. And it's just a beautiful reframe. And like, people aren't doing it to be malicious. You shouldn't attribute every thing that you find inconvenient down to malice. It's not a lot of the time. It's
not.
Genuine interest, or, as you said there, maybe I haven't communicated it effectively, or and it is your job as a leader to deal with those things, right? So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're clearly a very experienced, and from what I've heard of people in the market who worked under you, great leader.
Okay, it's good to hear.
Say nice things.
Okay, good.
But that usually comes a lot of the time from either having really bad leaders that you want to learn from, or really good leaders. Was there anyone that you've crossed paths with that you think has influenced your leadership style or journey?
I think I've been very lucky, I think, in some of the people I've worked with in the past that have very much influenced, the way I think. I mean, a couple of things really. I actually had my Scrum training again, long time ago, with a guy called Mike Code. Worked for a company called Mountain Goat Software, and he was really one of the sort of big hitters in Scrum. And that's, I think, having my face-to-face training with him and hearing his passion for it all. As it happens, I've kind of a bit cooler on Scrum these days than I used to be, but that passion at first hand really influenced me. I think on a more personal level, when I first moved up to the Northwest. So I moved up here 13 years ago with a 1-year-old child, bringing my wife up here we'd lived in Nottingham for 15 years. She had no network, so it was a big move to a company. And about a month before I joined, the CTO who'd hired me told me he was leaving, and by the time I joined the company, he wasn't going to be there.
Great.
So this was like a massive upheaval for me, and I joined the company with no CTO, which pretty much put me as the senior technology in the business, having known nothing about it. And luckily for me, they hired a CTO. And I think the first time he came into the office, I just completely unloaded on him. And this guy's been a strong influence on me. He's been a decent friend. We still have a good kind of relationship. A guy called David Espley, who's it was just so insightful to see the way he operated and the way he interacted up and down the chain.
Hmm.
You know, he was a better dev than any of the devs, but could also, find mistakes in the CFO's numbers. And he was just like, a great guy. We're still in touch quite a lot. In fact, we were supposed to meet up just before Christmas at a Slipknot gig.
Oh,
no
wow.
less. But it didn't work out, so we didn't. But we still talk regularly. He's been a massive influence on me, and there've been a couple of others, here and there, people that you've met and people you take little snippets away from. Yeah, I don't think I'd pick out anybody else particularly.
That must be a nice thing for him to hear, because I think that's the marker of if you feel like a marker of being successful in leadership is if you've created a future leader, right? That's like the
Yeah, I think that's probably a good
way to look at it.
good way to think about it. Yeah.
When you started your leadership career, was there any coaching at all, or did you just get thrust into it?
There was actually. My first team lead or tech lead position was reasonably early on, and I've done various, courses and this on, leadership and management, but they're usually like HR deliver these courses, and they're usually on how to do an appraisal and how to do a disciplinary and what to do if people are being made redundant. Very, very few of them are on more, general leadership and growth and I don't know. It's interesting. So I have had a lot of formal training, but I would say, like most of the things, I've kind of made it up as I've gone along. I at Griffin, at the ISP that I work for, is my first real sort of leadership gig on my own. I started with a team of 4 devs, and we kind of just made it up. It's a really small company. My induction involved unboxing and making my own chair.
Nice.
That was in the office, right? It was a chaotic place, but we were really close. I was still reasonably technical at the time, so I was doing a little bit of coding and stuff at the time, but I just kind of learned how I go along, and there was quite an interesting mix of people there as well to learn from. A couple that were reasonably junior, a couple that were very opinionated, and I kind of just learned as you go along. Right, you make some mistakes and you screw it up, and you say things you shouldn't say, realize how you're going to transform. But I don't. Yeah, I guess it's probably an insightful question. You say who you've learned it from, rather than you learn by example. I'm a big advocate of learning from example. And I guess it's just the people I've been around. I've been lucky that most of them were good. Some of them were awful, but better not name those on a podcast.
No, definitely.
But it's it's interesting. I think I've had a wide variety of influences, and I think I'd like to think I've taken the best bits from a lot of them, and hopefully I'm passing some of those things on. But we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned you've been in tech for a long time. Again, won't say how long, but COBOL. And what would you say? Is there any particularly big mistakes you've made? Are there any, like, I say the word mistake, and what comes to your mind?
What comes to my mind? Well, there's a couple of actual, proper simple howlers. I remember at one particular place I was approving a spreadsheet that had billing information for all of our customers on. And when I said approved to send out, of course, what I meant was all of this data is correct. you should send the right bits to each customer.
Oh,
But they'd sent everything to everybody.
oh no.
So that was directly on me. Directly my fault. That was a bad one. There was no harm in the end, but it was thinking I could get sacked over this one.
Yeah.
Are there any? Again, I think it is probably more a bunch of micro mistakes that you then iterate on. I don't think there's ever been any massive, nothing I would really point to that was like, oh, actually, that was pivotally a bad thing. Certainly there've been stuff that's gone wrong. But again, I think maybe it's that lean and agile mindset, right? That you just, as long as you've learned something from it, you don't go and do it again.
Sure.
Actually, that's part of it. But I certainly can't think of any massive howlers, or certainly anything that I should probably say on a podcast. Anyway. So, yeah, I guess that's it. It's just everything, right, has the potential to be a mistake. You just work it out as you go along. There's certainly a lot of course corrections, where you've done stuff. But again, I think it's part of being incremental. You don't hope to do this massive thing. You do a bunch of little things, and hopefully you're going in the right direction, and then you can kind of steer around it if it's not going right. But
Yeah.
I've hired some wrong people, people that didn't fit, or people for whatever reason weren't what I thought, which I'd say is on me, my fault, not the recruiters. For any recruiters listening, I didn't take responsibility for that. But no, I don't think there's anything like massive that I'd go, oh, you guys should never do this, learn from my mistake. That's it.
You obviously grown teams over the years, and you mentioned they're like making the wrong hire every now and again. I guess what's your approach to? And you mentioned tech test before. Sorry, what's your approach to hiring?
Do you know, typically, I mean, that really has changed over time. I think early on in my career, I absolutely would have hired the genius, the guy that could write a whole function in one line of code, the guy that knew all this stuff. But I absolutely would not do that now. It's team orientation, right? Is 1, 2, and 3 on the list. Can they work with the people you've got? Are they open and honest? Skills. This is something I speak about quite a bit, right? Skills can be acquired, like personalities can't really. I think that's, getting, clearly you want people to have the base skills, right? If I need a Java developer, I'm not going to hire, a tester. But actually, it depends what you need and what you're building. But the approach to hiring is absolutely team focus. And I think, more interestingly, hiring in the market as it is now, a lot of hiring it's about fit finding, right? It's about sales in a way, right? There's a lot of jobs out there. There are a lot of, the market ebbs and flows, but actually I think the most important thing, and I've always thought this is the whole interview process is not a competition to win a job. It's a set of conversations where you can find out if you can work together. Both if I'm going to an interview or if I'm interviewing somebody can I sit and have a brew with this person every morning and talk about our days? Is this, and is this someone who is going to improve the general health of the team? Is probably not the right word, but are they going to improve the team? Are they going to be someone who's actually going to contribute? And actually, that would be higher than have they got these exact skills? For example, I think cloud's a great one at the minute. You want an experienced cloud engineer, great. If you're on Azure, great. If that's been their background, if they're really good and they know the cloud principles, but they've been on AWS for the last few years, they probably just need to learn some new acronyms, right? The principles behind it are what's important. Similarly, you don't see this so often, but with a Java or a C# developer, or a Java and a .NET developer, that object-oriented programming, the construct's the same, the problem-solving element's the same, the actual language is a bit different. that for me will be less important than someone that was a good problem solver, someone that was a good person in the team. In the right context,
Sure.
right? If I need a contractor and I need them to be effective tomorrow, then they need exactly the skills I've got.
Mm.
And if they haven't got them, then they're not going to get in. But I think generally building a team, getting that right balance of mids and seniors, juniors, so that people are learning from each other. I think that's kind of important. So that I guess it goes back to something I said earlier, that the approach is more about asking the right questions than getting the right answers, right? If you ask the right questions, then you're probably going to find the person you need. If you try and just do a pro forma and get a bunch of CVs and go that one, and that one, you're probably not going to end up with the person you wanted.
What questions should you be asking to find a problem solver?
That's interesting. Part of it is giving people space to talk in the interview. So I really like some of the situation, describe a thing that you did. Don't talk to me about projects and project outcomes. What did you do? What did you actually do? What was your role in this team? Tell me about some thorny problems and how you solved them. It's not all that cliche crap about, what was it? Tell me how many things you could do with a brick, I think was one of the famous ones.
Or the Googles, if you're in a blender and you want to jump, if you were,
yeah, exactly. Those things don't, but actually just to give people space to talk, because often what you're going to see is some insights to how they solve problems. You may, again, this was pre-COVID, but I used to really like having people come and sit with the team, actually do some pair programming or some mobbing, and actually come in. That kind of all went away through COVID, and everyone was just doing AI tech tests now, which, but for me, it's not the code, it's how they approach it. Did they ask the right questions? Did they make a bunch of incorrect assumptions? Obviously, if they bowl up and they don't really know how to use Git or source control, and you're probably on a loser straight away. But actually, I've a couple of times hired people. I had the instinct that they were okay, even though their interviews were terrible.
Wow. Okay.
And that's, one guy in particular, right? He was racked with nerves, and you could just tell he was a reasonable junior. That's why his interview was terrible, because he was really nervous. But I could see underneath there was someone that actually understood what we were looking for, someone that could solve problems. And I hired him. He was great. It was really, really, really good. And we're still in touch now, many, many years afterwards. And he's, had a brilliant career in software. So it's all good. Yeah, I think that, as with many of these things, it comes back on you. It comes back on you asking the right questions and understanding what you really want. Not going, we need 10 Java developers, but actually knowing, this team needs to deliver this stuff, which means I need these specific skills or these specific kinds of people, or someone who's actually going to integrate with the team we've already got. Because that's the worst thing, right? You hire someone who's great, everybody in the team hates them, and then everybody's having a bad day straight away. So I think that's it's complicated, right? I guess I've talked around it a lot, but it's not simple. And some of it's just feel, right? Which I know is, again, not often the right answer, certainly, but sometimes you just get the feeling, right? You get the feeling that actually this person's going to fit, they're going to work, or they're my kind of people.
Sure. And it's not the easy answer, right? It's not, unfortunately, there isn't a formula. I think I've been doing recruitment for a long time, and I think the people that I know that are most successful at interviewing aren't the ones that say it's solely gut feel. We should have a coffee with them, and if we have a good chat, then let's hire them. It's not also the ones that are like, no, we have a scorecard, and if they've one score lower on the scorecard, we don't hire them. It's kind of mix of the two. It's like,
I agree.
Have a bit of a scorecard, but at the end, could you have a brew with them every single day and talk about your day? There's got to be a bit of both. But it's lovely to hear that you gave someone a chance, even though they were racked with nerves, and that you could see through that, because that's that happens more often than not.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah. AI is obviously changing everything. Are software engineers safe in your eyes?
Yes, I fundamentally, yes. I mean, I know it's much more prevalent. Lots more people are talking about AI. I've got books on my shelf talking about how AI is going to change the tech industry that were published in the 90s.
Wow.
Published in 2000, published here and there. It's much more out there. It's much more, and I think we are on the cusp of it. But really, it's not. I think it's hype again. People misunderstand what it actually is, right? All of our current AI models, and I mean, whatever it happens to be, ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or whatever, they are just much faster at searching the internet than you. That's it. They have no insights. They have no innate problem-solving ability. They have some very key limitations. Now, are they great at doing repetitive stuff? Yes. Are they going to replace certain, repetitive tasks? Can they look like they're being insightful? Yes, but it's only because they're building up a picture from the internet. So if the internet's full of the wrong answers, they will come back with the wrong answers because they've learned millions of people who've said the wrong answers. You see there's a particular phenomenon, I don't know if you looked at this, called AI hallucination, which is brilliant in a sense that they will, if you had say, I don't know, what did Winston Churchill think about X? They'll give you a quote. Most of the engines will actually give you a specific quote built up from the kind of things they know about Winston Churchill and the kind of things, if you said, what did Winston Churchill think about AI? It will give you an answer. Because if you limit your models to things that are only strictly factual, well, suddenly it becomes a lot less, because what's the best way to describe it? They have no concept of understanding a sentence, right? But the models generally statistically know which word is most likely to come after the word before.
Yeah, it's weighted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I say this, that, the other is probably the next word, because it's weighted on what the model knows. This is getting slightly out there and philosophical.
Love it.
I don't think it's ready, is the short answer. I think it can code completion. Some of the code that's generated by AI is pretty awful. It might work, but if you I've seen some interesting stuff where ChatGPT's written some code. I think, and then Claude has refactored that code, and you end up with some really interesting stuff. I think it's on a bit of a hype curve at the minute. Everybody is looking at what it can do for them. I think every business should be looking at what it can do for them. But it depends. It depends what your budget is and where you want to go with it. I was at a conference last year when AI was still in its infancy, and one big pharmaceutical company that has some presence in the Northwest were running through their AI and ethics policy. This document was 12 years old, which was a big eye opener for lots of people in the building. Because there's some people from reasonably well known but smaller businesses like, shit, we're only just thinking of this now. Obviously, they're in that space, with the pharma space, which is highly regulated. They'd been thinking about this stuff. They've also got a lot of money, right? So they put research into it. I don't think it's, we're not going to be burning the mills like they did in 1780 or whatever. It's not that kind of, people aren't going to be losing their jobs instantly. And I think it's really interesting, actually, as well. Probably a bit more of societal commentary, right? But when we're automating, menial tasks, all of, us, we all think that's great. When it's the creatives and the knowledge workers that are at risk, I think you're seeing a bit more of a backlash. It's quite interesting, and I what did I say? A great quote the other day. It's probably all over the place, isn't it? We don't want robots to start, writing novels and painting pictures. We want them to do the washing up, and that's that's the kind of thing. So no, I don't think it's ready. I don't think it's going to. It's not going to put developers out of work. I mean, look at low code, no code. It's been around for some time already.
Yeah.
yes, some businesses are using it, but it's not in the mainstream. It's not, because I think, again, developers are not, we don't want them because they're great at writing Java. I mean, we've had code completion in IDEs for years. What we want is a problem solving ability. How do we solve this problem? And I think that's, AI is not great at that. It doesn't have those insights yet. It'll come. I'm sure it'll come. I don't think it's now.
Well, if you would start your last 2 questions, I promise.
Yeah, that's right.
If you were to start your career again, where the world is now, would you do anything differently, or would you go into a different direction?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I think maybe this is to do with the, iterative mindset. But I don't know. I haven't got an answer for questions like that, because I would hope. I started this career by accident, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I start the next one by accident? It was. I should qualify here at some point, in case my wife actually watches this podcast. It was her suggestion that I look for a career in software development.
Wow.
So I should say that now,
Okay.
right? Just in case, just to save me getting in
So the
trouble.
first step is meet your
Sorry,
wife.
Zoe. Yeah, there you go. But I don't think there would be any. I don't know. I don't even know if I've done this career right. Never mind the next one. I might have something else to do. I'd love to, when I'm done with technology, I'll go find something else, and it'll be the same now. I don't think. I think there's all the big things you could pick at. People that go and do computer science degrees and do all this. I certainly wouldn't do that. I'd much rather be talking to a hobbyist who's been mucking around doing mods for Minecraft than someone who's spent years doing a degree learning how to do maths in binary, which is great in theory, but it's not practical. So I think, but no, I haven't got any great insight in there. I think I'd probably do the thing I thought was right, and I'd find out if it was or not. So yeah, I don't know. Haven't got a good answer there.
Something I've been thinking about just day to day recently is the career advice. Follow your interests.
Yeah.
And I'm torn between the idealistic version of myself and the realistic version of myself, being that idealistically, that sounds awesome. Follow your interests, and are you gonna, you'll never work a day in your life. Realistic side of me thinks, yeah, but there has to be some sort of financial motivation behind it as well. I guess what my question is, what do you think to the career advice being follow your interests?
I guess I'm a bit like you. I would like to say absolutely do that. Yeah, you've got to earn money, right? You've got to go and find a way of supporting yourself. Maybe, right? Or maybe you go and find a life where you don't need much money.
Yeah.
If that's what really motivates you. I think certainly chasing a career solely because you think that's the thing that's going to pay you the most money is unlikely to be the reality for most people. And actually, what's interesting, and again, I'm going to have to name check my wife again here. She's a careers coach, and I think she'd I've had some really interesting insights from her around this. Again, I'm going to pick these at random, but some bank manager or someone who's really, really, really unhappy, and all they've done is been a bank manager because they started as a bank clerk accidentally. But what they really want to do is, be an actor. And she would say what you've got to get underneath is why do they want to be an actor? What is it? Being an actor is a big thing, but what is it actually about being an actor? Is it being on stage? Is it having an audience? Is it being famous? Is it just being around the theatre? And actually, if you drill down into this, it may well be that they don't want to be an actor. They just like that lifestyle. And actually, they're never going to be an actor, but they could go get a job at the Arts Council, or they could go and work at the local theatre, or something that gives them what they want without that big tag. Or, someone similarly, they don't like the 9 to 5. So, go be chef, go do something that's non-standard, that's different. I think it's finding, again, we're straying into philosophy again, but I think that it's a balance again, isn't it? Because how many of us realistically could stick 30 years, 20 years, 10 years doing something we absolutely hated? Just if your sole goal is retiring at 30 or whatever, and you get on the oil rigs at 15 and save all your money and have this dangerous wild life where you're out working for 6 weeks and then back again, or that's maybe that is what drives some people. I think you have to do what's right for you, but I think generally if you're not finding something that's, because often for people it's not even the work that's fulfilling, it's the people they're with, right? It doesn't matter what you're actually doing. The fact is you're doing it with a bunch of people that you like and get on with. But I don't know. I think you have to have an element, and I'm not going to go down the follow your dreams thing, but there has to be something that you enjoy. I imagine, perhaps it's just me again, the thought of getting up every morning thinking, oh my God, I've got to go and do that again. Hey, but I'm getting paid. I mean, that it's soul destroying. And I know a lot of people are in that position.
Yeah.
And this isn't about that. This is your question's about choice. So I would advise people to try and find something that you enjoy. And if not, find something that pays well and then do what you enjoy at the weekends, right? It's hard. But yeah, I think there's got to be an element of you've got to try and find something out there that does it for you. But again, totally, I've been lucky. I really love what I do. I love the people I do it with, for the most part, and I'm very, very happy to think about what I'm going to be doing at work the next day. Well, not always, but
Not
mostly.
always.
But mostly, yeah.
Yeah, and there's always going to be bits you don't enjoy, but yeah, I think that element of gratitude is something to think about. Day to day is like if you do enjoy your job, and there's always going to be bits of your job that are a bit shit, that you don't enjoy doing, whatever. It's just that's realistic. But understanding that for the most part, your job is something you enjoy is a really fortunate position to be in, and it's something good to think about. Last question, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
One piece of advice you would give to someone who's starting their career in leadership?
Probably the most fundamental thing is authenticity, right? You've got to be you, whatever that means. Because if you can't be you, then you are in the wrong job, and especially with leadership, right? If you're on your own, then you can wing it, but actually, if you have to have trust, and I just don't think you can ever build trust unless you've got that authenticity, unless someone understands what you want and who you are and why you want it. I think you're going to fail. You are going to fail in this line of work. Again, I'm not talking about the sergeant or the general who's got to give orders. I mean, where you've got to working in again what we'll call the knowledge field broadly. I think you've got to be authentic. You've got to have some. It doesn't matter if you've never done that job. You just have to be honest and open and be you, because I think if not, it will become tiring. If you're not being authentic, eventually the real you is going to come out, and then it's all going to go wrong, right? So I think you've got to start. If you start with that in mind, and I know you only said one thing, but the other thing I think would be to genuinely believe that everybody is trying to do a good job. I think that's one. It's a management pitfall of, oh, they're doing it wrong. But actually, if you genuinely believe everybody's trying to do the best they can, and then you've just got to help them do that a bit better and start removing the things that are stopping them. I think that's very, I find that extremely fulfilling. So I would say that would be something I'd say to someone is, try and, be you and actually trust people, right? Don't. I think that's important is sort of, let's start with trust and then work out if I don't trust you later. Because if you start with distrust, then you never kind of get away from that. It's hard. It's just hard. And again, I think some of it's going to be down to your own personality. You may, if you want to lead in a certain way, you should lead in a certain way. But yeah, being honest, God, that sounds really cheesy, but being honest, right? Being open and honest and actually honesty. There you go. Back to one word, honesty. Be honest. Yeah.
Well, look, the cliche answers are usually the best, and there's a reason that they're cliched, because they're usually thrown out quite a lot, for a good reason. Mick, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
I've really enjoyed this, and excited to see how everything goes at you and Shaw over the next 12 months.
Good. Well, let's keep in touch.
Yeah.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Anything we talked about will be linked in the show notes, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll catch you on the next one.